Okay, thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for that exciting build-up to introduce us. We are both from the Rare Breed Survival Trust, an organisation which exists to conserve and promote native livestock. I'm Christopher Price, I'm Chief Executive, and I'm with John Atkinson, who is our Chair. As you will guess from our accents, neither of us are locals, so forgive us if we make any faux pas over issues that are peculiar to Northern Ireland. Nothing rude intended. We're going to be a double act. I will start off talking a bit about native breeds generally in a moment. I'll then hand over to John, who is going to explain the benefits of native breeds, and we're very much about that. By far the most effective way to conserve native livestock is to use them for the purposes for which they are originally bred, whether that's food, clothing, transportation, or increasingly conservation grazing. And they were meant to do those jobs in our particular landscapes, habitats, climates, etc. They're meant to be here, and the more we can remember that, the better. Okay then, first of all, Northern Ireland's native breeds. There might be more than you think. I mean, I'm sure if anyone says Northern Irish native breeds, the first thing you'd think of is Moilies, Irish Moyles. Then you might think of Dexters, rather attractive picture of a Dexter staring up at me there. But we've been doing quite a lot with DAERA of late, talking about policies for native breeds going forward as Northern Ireland rolls out its new agricultural policy. And we were quite surprised when we started talking about native breeds and decided to clarify with DAERA what they were talking about. And they came back to us with a list of about 30 breeds which they regard as native over here. It's pretty much all the UK native breeds, which was, I say, a very pleasant surprise. So for those of you who think of Northern Ireland's native breeds as just being Moilies and Dexters, it's actually rather more than that, which is why we are going to be talking about rather more than that. But anyway, that's enough of me for the moment. I'm now going to hand over to John, who is going to talk about why you should be keeping native breeds because of the business benefits they bring. So over to John.
Thanks, Christopher. So I have to work out which one is the red one. No?
Right-hand side, that's it.
That's it. So I'm virtually blind, so I can't see that anyway, but I'll just talk to it. So the opportunities, the cultural heritage of the breeds are a big selling point. So people have affection and affiliation with local breeds, and so that's a really good selling point. And also they tend to be much more attractive. Not that I'm attracted to sheep or anything, but they do sell a good story. And also you've got that provenance of it being a native or local breed. That's a rather attractive moilie there on an Irish stamp. They're also good for conservation grazing, as Christopher mentioned, and as they were bred for this landscape and the ecology and everything, that they're the best animals for reproducing it. And personally, I graze a lot of land for conservation organisations that want the habitat to be created but don't want the hassle of actually owning animals. And quite a few bought the land and left it barren for a few years and then realised all the things they bought it for were actually dying out. And unless you've got that movement animals and grazing, all the butterflies, the birds and the flowers and such like that survive there need that grazing to reproduce and work. So they're vital to that sort of ecosystem, even though you might think they aren't. The animals are needed. As part of the RBST, we have a gene bank, so we store all the breeds we have in storage as a safeguard in case there's a massive health outbreak, or some of the breeds there's very few left. So if there's an outbreak somewhere where most of the breeds are kept, so a lot of breeds are kept in their certain area. So I think 75% of the Gloucester cows are in Gloucester. So if there's an outbreak there, it could be quite risky to that breed. So we keep a gene bank stored of semen and embryos of all the breeds. But also we have semen for sale. So when we collect semen, we obviously get more than we need, so that's available to other people, if they want to get semen. I know it's very difficult in Northern Ireland at the moment importing animals, we're trying to work to help that as well. The other thing you can do is sell direct. I know quite a few of the talks in the other tents have mentioned about selling direct, and if you've got a local niche produce, then that's a good selling point. So I used to sell meat boxes to customers all over the country, and it's a lot of work and it's quite hard. So what I do now is I sell to the local butcher, so he has all the work and I get a better price for my produce. And a lot of the sort of breeds that I keep, if you took them to the local auction mart, they'd look a bit funny and different. But once you get that skin off and the head off, it just looks the same as everything else. And actually, the butcher that buys it off me likes the variety of different breeds of animals, so he can then market that on his in his shop as, this is not what you usually get. So each breed has different flavours, different textures and stuff. So that's a good marketing point for him. And I keep quite a lot of different breeds because he wants a similar sized carcass all year round. So it'd be pointless if I had just had Suffolks and they were all ready in April and then had nothing else for the rest of the year. So having quite a few different breeds that finish at different times helps me spread it out through the year. So I supply him with pork and beef and lamb right throughout the year, and take something to the abattoir every week. So it's just one way you can sort of use native animals to actually help you, especially if you've got a smaller farm or you're near a population that you might want to sell to. I've also sold to restaurants in the past, and sometimes that's great, and sometimes they're really bad payers. So it's quite, it can be good and it can be bad. So main thing I always say is don't put all your eggs in one basket, because if you've got lots of different outlets, then it's safer than just having one outlet. Anyway, I'll pass back to Christopher now.
Have you reached the end of those?
Sorry?
You've reached the end?
I don't know.
No, you haven't.
What else did I have?
That's okay.
Well,
Okay, so John has spoken about the positive side, about the various markets that are available with native breeds, not just for meat, but the other things that you can sell and base a business on as well. But it is still challenging. It's not the same as conventional continental breed sort of farming, livestock farming. And so I'm just going to run through some of the challenges that we find that people face in the sector. The first is almost the assumption that you can't build a business on native breeds. I found it quite hard to find something to illustrate this, but this was a sort of sarcastic piece that Adam Henson wrote in a new magazine called Scribehound. And in it, he starts off by sort of making the negative case. And I'm sure if any of you keep native breeds, you will have heard this, or rare breeds, you will have heard the phrase, they're rare for a reason, which we find immensely frustrating. But it is still the default attitude amongst many livestock farmers, and so much of what we do in RBST is trying to challenge that sort of perception in the way that John was just describing. In fact, I was talking to a guy in North Yorkshire a while ago who is a new farmer, and often we find it's new farmers, first-generation farmers who keep native breeds rather than ones who come from farming families. And he kept white-bred shorthorns. And he went to, I think it was Hexham Market with his white-bred shorthorns, and the established farmers there were almost teasing him, saying, why are you farming these funny things? Just a hobby, you shouldn't be here. And he thankfully had some of his numbers with him and said, these are my input costs, these are my profit, look how much am I making per beast, how much are you making per beast? Oh, that's less, isn't it? So who's got the hobby now? Which I thought was quite a good rebuttal. Okay, the other thing, there are costs associated with keeping native breeds. Quite often you'll hear people thinking because they were bred for our landscape, habitat, etc., you can just turf them out and they'll be fine 24/7 in the field or on the hill or whatever. There is something in that, but it's not altogether true. There are costs. You do still need vet support. You might need supplementary feed at certain times. And one of the challenges we sometimes find is that conventional vets aren't always au fait with the sort of issues that native breed farmers care about, which can mean you need to go and find someone with a bit of a specialism or whatever, particularly if you're looking at the breeding side as well as the sort of welfare and biosecurity side of veterinary work. John's touched on this, but the market that we operate in is different. Selling native breed meat into supermarkets can be a challenge. We tend to be working at a smaller scale, so we're not producing the volumes that supermarkets want. A lot of the animals we use aren't standard and so don't fit into what the supermarkets want. Consistency of supply can also be a problem. Supermarkets want the same thing week in, week out in large volume. We don't do that. That's not what our brand is about. So the challenge is finding new routes to market in the way that John described with the short supply chains, direct selling and the like, which is a skill. It's a separate skill from being a farmer, which makes it all the more challenging. Most farmers are good at producing good food efficiently. Selling that good food efficiently is a different skill set. Breeding can also be a problem. We are talking about breeds. Working out the genetics, the pedigrees, etc., can be challenging. Again, it's a different sort of skill set. There's a couple of pictures of Dexter, mother and calf there. I'm not making a particular point about Dexters. It's true across the board, but it's a new area of expertise that you have to have if you're really going to make a go of it in our sector. And there are people that do it clearly, but it's novel, it's niche. Sorry, bugger. And again, it's a different sort of farming. It's almost going back to the point I mentioned earlier about the guy in North Yorkshire who was with the white-bred shorthorns, who was being teased almost for not farming the right things. I mean, I appreciate the example of the feedlots there is an extreme opposite to what we're talking about, but it's not mainstream farming, and it can be difficult for people who want to go and do something different. We, in England, what the NFU are concerned about isn't really what we're concerned about with the frustration, which is a frustration. And I sense that things can be even more polarised in other parts of the UK. There's no Ulster Farmers Union stand here, for example. We are working outside the mainstream of farming with all of the baggage that brings. And then there is policy and regulation. The rules which apply to a lot of what we do is different, or not just different, in addition to what applies to mainstream farming. So what am I thinking of here? Well, if you're involved with a breed society, you'll probably know about the Zootech rules, which regulate breed societies if they want to export to mainland Europe. There's a whole lot of stuff there which is fantastically complicated. But if you're going to sell, well, not just native breed, but pedigree meat into Europe, you need to comply with these rules. If you're not selling pedigree stuff, it's irrelevant to you. Across the UK, all 4 governments are working at various stages on rolling out new agriculture policies. Each government has its own pressures and sensitivities. In England, we're the furthest ahead because we had to go and set the legislation that sets the framework for the other 3 countries. And we've got, it's called the SFI, or ELM being environmental land management and the single farming incentive being the largest part of that. That gives farmers 140 different options to choose from, each with different payment rates for doing different things, and you package them together. But it's a challenge to work your way through. Of those 140, 4 of them are concerned with the use of native breeds in different circumstances, and you have to go and work out how they will fit in across the board. If you're a mainstream livestock farmer, that's irrelevant to you. You don't have to you won't want to go and look at that sort of stuff, but there's another layer. A particular issue in Northern Ireland, which I'm sure many of you will be aware of. I see John at the back, who knows a lot about this. Northern Ireland has better grass than most of the UK, or perhaps all of the UK. And as a result, cattle farming is a much bigger thing here. Good thing, perhaps, but the corollary is emissions are higher. The way that DARA has chosen to address that, as I'm sure most of you know, is by incentivising culling at 30 months. The idea being you can keep the same number of beasts, but if you reduce the age of slaughter, then the overall emissions go down. That might be good in principle, not sure it is. I'm not sure that just killing early is the best way to reduce emissions. You ought to be taking into account a wider range of factors. But it's particularly worrisome for most of our native breeds, which take longer to finish than 30 months. You know, we, because of the way in which DARA has decided to face the climate challenge, you know, our breeds are being discriminated against. We've raised this a lot over the last couple of years with DARA and got nowhere when there was no government. Well, in fact, it started when when Edwin Poots was the minister, and the reason I know that was that I was invited to appear on the radio programme on, I can't sort of forgotten the name of it, in the weekday evenings on farming, and they said just before I went on that I wasn't just going to be interviewed by the journalist. They'd got the minister to respond to me, Edwin Poots. And so the journalist said, or interviewer said, so Mr. Price, what are your concerns about DARA's proposals on 30 months? And I said my piece. And she went across, so Mr. Poots, Mr. Price thinks you've got it wrong on this. What do you say to Mr. Price? And Edwin Poots said, I think Mr. Price is an idiot. Which made me think I hadn't got that much traction with him. And then the government collapsed, although I don't think the two were connected. But we had challenges with the officials. We've been speaking to the new minister, who was thankfully here today. Hopefully there'll be some reconsideration, but it's not a great position to be starting from. Oh, sorry, that was shorter than I expected. But so the point I want to go and get across is that, yes, there are plenty of economic benefits to be made from keeping native breeds, but it's not straightforward, and you do need to do your homework and think through the factors that I've just been itemising. I'm now going to hand back to John, because unlike me, he actually has done it, because he is a farmer who runs, I didn't introduce him properly, but runs a very successful business based on the back of native breeds. So, John, do you want to go and say how to make it all work?
I don't know about that. I did miss one slide before, which was rather lax of me. But the other thing that you can do is sell your progeny for breeding. So a lot of my sales, the pedigree progeny, go to other farmers for breeding. And that's growing a lot as more people are getting into regenerative farming. They're wanting native breeds because they are easier to handle, they fit the system better, and they can live outside all winter. So the sale of pedigree progeny is really good. And 90% of my stock I sell from home. I don't have to take it to the auction or anything, because people come to me wanting it. So it's a good way of getting extra money. So I'm trying to read this. So a lot of it's education. So I'm old enough. I went to college, nearly 45 years ago now, and they're still teaching exactly the same thing in agricultural college as they were 45 years ago. And it's only like events like this and media and social media where we're actually getting the message out that things are changing. And this article's about somebody from Northern Ireland, but we were in the pub last night chatting over a meal and a pint or two, and everybody's saying, you know, that trying to change the education system in most countries is very, very difficult, because they've got a curriculum that suits them. A lot are sponsored by the big ag companies, or you know, in other ways are sponsored by the big ag companies, and they don't want us to change because that's how they make their money. So educating people about a different way of farming is quite difficult, and these sort of events are really good. Yeah, farm support, again, as Christopher says, you know, we're lobbying all the governments about farm support, and how, you know, your sort of NFU and people like that are looking at the big farms and the big spenders. And, you know, a lot of farms are quite small in Northern Ireland, like I'm from the Lake District, so we've got lots of small farmers as well. And we seem to miss out on a lot of the changes. So again, it's lobbying and trying to get across that there are actually more small farmers than there are big farmers. And we are very important to what they want. You know, we tend to be more diverse. We tend to have more interest in conservation. So all the things that the government wants, but it's just getting them to listen to us. Is this, that was earlier today, was it? No?
That's Balmoral Show.
That's Balmoral Show, sorry. I don't know whether you went to Balmoral Show, but Aaron, who's the RBST person in Northern Ireland, actually got a group of like-minded organisations together, and they had a place in the middle of the Balmoral Show, and it was really interesting to talk to all the other people that were there and all the different people that came. That there was actually a lot of interest in the sort of stuff that we did, and more and more interest in sort of reducing inputs, better farming for conservation, and better use of the land. Right, I still can't see this picture. That's a market. So it's again, talking about marketing your produce, and all the talks I've been to today have all mentioned about marketing your produce, and you know, if you can cut out the middleman, then you're making a lot more money. So you know, there's so many people live off farmers right along the supply chain, both selling stuff to us and then buying stuff off us at the lowest possible price and then selling it on. So we buy retail and sell wholesale, and you know, that never works. So it is hard trying to retail your own stuff, but it does work, and it does give you more, to me it gives you more enjoyment at the end, because you're in touch with the actual person you're selling it to. And it's fantastic when we get emails back, you know, from people saying, oh, well, really enjoyed your product, it's absolutely marvellous, it's changed my life and stuff like that. You don't get that when you buy off Amazon. You know, you're actually talking to the person that's buying it off you, and then 9 times out of 10 they buy other stuff. So we personally sell in some shops, but we sell in motorway services and tourist areas. And then if people buy the product, then they're likely to buy it online afterwards, because you know, they're not going to go back there to buy the product again. They'll buy it straight from us, and then we make twice as much on it because we're selling it retail rather than wholesale.